Recording in progress.
Carlos going to be here? Wow.
Oh, I don't know. Have you heard anything from Carlos?
Like, cool. So we get to go do one PSA and then never get anything. It's really fun. Those are my favorite right now.
Sounds like.
So are we ready? Are we live? All right, everybody. I think we're live. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 6, 2022 Walnut Creek Design Review Commission meeting. Commissioners will be participating from council chambers. Members of the public are invited to attend and participate at the locations identified on this agenda. As a courtesy and technology permitting, members of the public may continue to provide live remote oral comment via the city's Zoom video conferencing platform. However, the city cannot guarantee that the public's access to teleconferencing technology will be uninterrupted, and technical difficulties may occur from time to time. Members of the public desiring to provide comments as part of the meeting are encouraged to either submit written comments at least 2 hours prior to the meeting or to attend the meeting in person. If you do plan on speaking to the commission tonight, do please fill out a speaker's card. All right, can we do welcome and roll call? Let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Valea is absent. Commissioner Case.
Here.
Commissioner Newsom.
Here?
Vice Chair Killian.
Here.
And Chair Carling.
Here, thank you. All right, moving on to item 2, consent calendar. We have one item on the agenda, I think eligible for moving to consent, and that is item C, Carmel Townhomes 1-year extension. Does anyone on the commission object to moving the 1-year extension to consent?
Nope.
All right, then we'll move the Carmel Townhomes application number Y18090 for 1-year extension to consent. Do we have anything else on consent, Mr. Secretary?
Do not.
Okay, then we will accept consent items as is. Moving to item 3, public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not already on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. So let's start in the chambers. Is there anyone who wishes to address the Commission who is not already on the agenda? And do we have anybody on Zoom raising their hand?
We do not.
And I'm
Chair, just as a point of order, did we need to vote on that consent calendar, that item?
I don't believe we vote on consent.
We don't vote on that item to,
There is somebody on Zoom.
I will defer to.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know in my other board, we never vote on moving to consent.
Oh, not moving it, but the item. Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Secretary, any comments on if we need to officially vote on the consent items?
He said no.
I don't believe you do, but we should ask if there's anybody in the public that wants to speak on that item, just to make sure there's nobody here for that.
Great, and I think that would fall under the current public communications, so we'll re-ask if anybody wishes to speak on the Carmel Townhomes.
We're having a little clarification. Let's just vote, just to make sure
Okay.
that we have a record. And
That works for me. Then can we take a roll call vote on approving the 1-year extension on the Carmel Townhomes application Y18090?
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Newsom,
Yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes?
Chair Carling.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Vice Chair Killian. So going back to public communication, did we have anybody on Zoom raising their hand? And also, I realized I forgot to mention, our Zoom meeting ID, 849-7372-7546. Your login password is 074865. You can also call voice only, 1-669-900-6833.
Okay, we do now have 2 speakers. I'm going to promote Robert to speak. Robert
Great.
Schroeder.
Okay, and can we set the timer to 2 minutes?
Sure.
And
We'll start when he comes in.
are you there, Mr. Schroeder?
Sorry, I'm not totally clear on, so I raised my hand to speak to the project for the Carmel Townhomes.
Okay.
Do I have an opportunity to speak on that point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I just want you to know, so my parents are property owners at 1501 and 1505. And so they just received notice of this just in the last 2 days. And so we haven't had time to actually look through anything because I just became aware of it. So my dad's 87. And so they're not very quick in picking this stuff up and figuring out what's going on. So I guess a couple questions I have is were there plan changes made that are being considered now by the design review team, or were there no changes that were asked for? And this is just merely an extension.
In this, so as a point of a clarification, in this current agenda item, it was just to give them a 1-year extension
Okay.
prior to to allow them time to get their permits. There were some minor changes in a prior public hearing, and I'm not sure I have the date ready at hand, but it is, if you go to the city's website, all the prior materials and resolutions from the commission are there online, and you'd be able to read about the changes that were made back then. I think it was last year,
Perfect.
I
Okay,
believe.
yeah, I did attend a meeting about a year ago for that. So all I have for a comment is it would be great if we could be added to the list of people that need to be notified, just so that we can be more aware of what's going on with this. And then secondly, there just has been a lot of delays in this project. And at some point, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, the
I'm gonna
neighbors
have to-
don't really have an opportunity to provide feedback, but they're being continuously dragged through this ongoing process. And granted, things change and we need to, sort of adapt and roll with it. But we don't really have the opportunity, I feel, to engage with these homeowners to sort of figure out what the final plan is going to be. Yet we are being affected by this.
Yes,
We've
sir,
had
I'm going to have
tenants that
to,
decided-
sir, Mr. Schroeder, I'm going to have to cut you at your 2 minutes. Your point is taken, and we appreciate your time.
Through the chair, the applicant or the speaker could also contact the project planner, and they can assist them in understanding the process and the next steps.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
And then I think we had another person on Zoom?
I think they're just attendees at this point. No other people have their hands raised.
Okay, great. Then one last chance, anybody in the chambers who wishes to speak on items not on the agenda? There being none, we will close public comment. There is an opportunity for public comment on the agenda items. All right, moving to item 4, public hearings. Item A, our Holden of Walnut Creek Senior Living Community Project, Design Review and Tree Removal Review, application Y21079. Does staff have a report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Haley Crawford, a senior planner here with the City of Walnut Creek. And today I will be presenting a project before you for final design review consideration. This is for Holden of Walnut Creek. It's a senior living community proposed at 1220 Rossmore Parkway. The project kind of general request before you tonight includes the demolition of the existing medical office building on site, to allow for the construction of a new 2-story residential care facility. The overall kind of gross square footage after construction would be 113,846. The project features 139 units with a total of 146 beds. There will be a basement level with some amenity courtyard spaces and landscaped areas throughout. and 76 total surface parking stalls. So just to orient us a bit, the site here is highlighted in blue. It is currently under a planned development zoning, PD 930, which also shares the same zoning with the adjacent site. And the PD allows for residential care facility uses. So the project before you tonight is consistent with the general plan and the zoning and does require final design review approval as well as tree removal approval. Just to kind of gain some context of what's around, there is a skilled nursing facility, another residential care facility along Rossmore Parkway Court, and then Rossmore Shopping Center is just adjacent to the site across the street. So as I mentioned, this was a former medical office building. Here are just some photos of the existing site conditions. I do want to point out, as we move along to the proposed plans, that the current situation for circulation along Rossmore Parkway, there is a driveway entrance, and then at the end of each of those drive aisles along Rossmore Parkway Court, the kind of North Street at the top of the screen, there are a series of kind of curb cut driveway entry and exits that feed along that entire court to gain circulation into the site. Those will be eliminated as part of this plan, so I want to point those out just for some context. So the DRC last reviewed this project back in September at a study session and was generally supportive of the project as a whole, but did ask for some modifications and additional information. The applicant has made those modifications and is here it's for final consideration. Some of those comments, though, were to reconsider the proposed site circulation as it seemed tight at the time, to further study the proportions of the entry tower, cantilevered gables, and the stone base elements, provide additional details on some outdoor amenity spaces, including expanding an area at the south terrace, as well as providing some more detailed architectural and landscape plans. So in response, the applicant, and I'll go into detail in the plans, but as a quick summary, has eliminated a driveway that was proposed close to the Rossmore Parkway and Rossmore Parkway Court intersection, provided modified the surface parking area because of that driveway change, and modified the kind of decorative paving elements at the entryway, provided some additional architectural details for consideration, looked at refining some of the proportions of the stone base elements, the entry features, the cantilevered gables, also expanded and activated that south terrace per comments from the DRC, and looked at additional programming for the interior courtyard spaces, and then finally provided an arborist report, which we were missing at the last time, that analyzes the trees being proposed to remove. So here's a previously proposed site plan just to refresh our memory. The driveway that is being eliminated is again the one at the upper left corner of that screen, adjacent to the corner of this project site. So here is the modification proposed, and as I mentioned, they have eliminated that driveway, which eliminated some kind of traffic safety concerns and allowed for some additional parking. So now all of the required parking is being met on site, on the paved parking site. There's additional stalls, 11 parallel stalls running along Rossmore Parkway Court that the applicant has provided above and beyond what they're required to kind of help address some of the concerns of parking in the area. I'll quickly go through some of the floor plans, which have not drastically changed since you last saw them, but here's the basement floor plan, the first floor plan, and I'll point out here that south terrace element. There's some landscape plans we'll get to, but you can see at the southern edge of the building, that area has been expanded and additional seating has been provided there. And the second floor plan. I do want to mention that the applicant worked with staff to address some kind of unique height situations on site. So at the previous proposal, the southwestern corner of the building, as shown here, highlighted in red, was exceeding the height, building height as we measure in our code, which is from base elevation, which is existing or finished grade, up to the top elevation of the building. There's a section in our code which allows our community development director to kind of make a finding where there's a unique topography or unique kind of site characteristic on site that would kind of prevent or that, that would require maybe a unique definition of building height. And so in this case, the applicant requested that staff look at it. And so just for that portion of the building that's highlighted in red, there is a significant grade change at this point. And so given that unique site feature, our community development director did make a call that the parapet in this area would be a continuous parapet and that the building actually would be allowed to utilize the base elevation for the northwest corner of the building as a continuous line to allow for the parapet. When I get to the elevations, I think that'll be a little more clear, but I do want to show it here as the proposed roof plan. And what this allows for is along that elevation, it allows for a more continuous ridge line without having to step down. And here actually is a great example. That upper elevation, you see where that ridge line steps down where those last three kind of gable elements are. That was the previously proposed plan, and that is just a direct result of our building codes measure, our definition of building height. And so in allowing our community development director to make kind of a unique finding in this case, given the topography, that ridgeline has now been brought up as a continuous line, and I'll show that in a minute. Here's the, just in general, the previously proposed elevations, just for a quick reference. And here's now is what's being proposed. So that bottom elevation is that same elevation now with that continuous ridgeline. As I mentioned, in general, the applicant has looked at kind of refining the architectural details, refining some proportions for these stone base elements, and especially that entry tower feature. They've also provided elevations of the south, which we did not have at the previous DRC. That bottom elevation also shows kind of that expanded southern terrace area. Just for comparison purposes, here is the upper elevation is the previously proposed that DRC saw at a study session, or excuse me, the bottom elevation. Actually, I think I have those reversed, excuse me. The top is the previous, the bottom is what's being proposed tonight. And you can see, especially at the entry tower, where those proportions have been refined, and what's being proposed is I think consistent with what DRC's feedback was. As I mentioned, more building details have also been provided as part of your package. Some of the comments last time were just more questions asking, how far some of these cantilevered elements were projecting. Some window details have also been provided. So here's just a quick image, but that was included in your package. And finally, color material sample. The general color material palette has not changed since the study session. And just some renderings for context. And we'll move on to the landscape plan. There was a preliminary landscape plan shown at the study session, and some comments were received about some of the activities going on in the courtyard spaces, and again, the expansion of that southern terrace element. Right here. So the applicant has both provided additional details on how those courtyard spaces are going to be activated, as well as expanded that terrace element, or that terrace area. And here's a detail of that, showing some of the activation. Lots of additional seating area. That was one of the comments to kind of activate the space and take advantage of the views. The other area that I'll just draw attention to is the entry, where there's some decorative paving, some water features here, and also some potential public art that is being proposed generally in this location. And at this stage, the applicant has not begun working with the Arts Commission, but will be, so they're just showing some general locations. And lastly, I'll just touch on the tree removal and dripline encroachment permit requirements. So there's 66 trees on site. The applicant is proposing to remove 41 of them, including one highly protected valley oak, which has an evaluation of $2,650. If that tree is proposed to be removed, that amount will go into a tree in lieu fund. They are proposing to preserve 25 trees on site and will be replanting 74. So given the modifications made by the applicant, staff is supportive of this project and believes that they've addressed a lot of the kind of comments received at the study session, and is ultimately recommending tonight that the commission move to adopt the resolution and grant final design review approval for the Holden Senior Living Project, subject to the conditions contained in your draft resolution tonight. Before I turn over to questions, I'll just note we also received several letters, public correspondence, letters of support for the project tonight. Those have been provided to you. There's copies also at the back for the public if they're interested. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Haley. So time for commissioner questions. I'll just call on each of you. Commissioner Case, any questions?
Nope.
Commissioner Newsom?
Nope.
Vice Chair Killian?
Nope.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
One is just an understanding on the fund for the trees. Do applicants only put money in the fund if it's a highly protected tree?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Do you know if, and fellow commissioners, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was some discussion about the size and flow and access to those center patios. Was anything discussed about that in the next submission? Because it's kind of hard to tell from the drawings if anything really changed there, the interior patio areas or garden areas.
There's a kind of pedestrian circulation plan that was included, or kind of a pedestrian access plan that was included as part of the package. I apologize, I did not put that in my presentation. The applicant may have that in theirs, but that was included, I think, to help clarify how those courtyards were being accessed. And then to address some of the other comments, they have provided a lot more detail on how those have been activated, so what the activities are.
Okay.
So that circulation diagram is sheet L1.8.
Okay. And then the other thing that popped up in my memory, I believe we had homeowners from a neighborhood, if you're looking at the pictures, the way they're in the plans to the upper left, and they were concerned about potential noise from the equipment and the rooftop equipment, and they said they were told they wouldn't have noise from the other senior housing development, and they ended up getting noise. Was there any discussion or changes related to that?
No changes. The applicant is, continuing to work on kind of their, final construction plans and mechanical plans, but they are going to be roof-mounted, screened equipment. And, I think, I do remember part of the discussion last time is that I think some of the older buildings in that area have older units that might be a little more loud than some of these new. So they obviously will be required to provide, units that meet our current code, which, are a little bit more efficient. But they are still proposing them on the roof.
Okay, and then, let's see. Oh, this is just sort of a technical question. In our resolution, proposed resolution, there's a comment there about CEQA compliance. Is that informational for the commissioners, or are the commissioners opining on that compliance if we approve the resolution?
So it is, it's part of the project scope. Staff has recommended that it meets all the qualifications of a Class 32 infill exemption. So if the resolution is adopted as is, then it would be the commission kind of agreeing and putting that in the motion as part of the resolution.
And is this project going through planning commission, or is that not necessary?
No, so because it's consistent with zoning, it only requires design review approval.
So I'll just speak for myself as commissioner. I sort of felt that on design review, CEQA was out of our wheelhouse of responsibility to opine on. So maybe that's something we can talk about offline in the future.
Yeah, for projects that, it's the highest approving body is the body that would opine on it. So for projects where, in this case, the Design Review Commission is the highest approving body.
Then it's just probably important for awareness that everyone knows that we would be agreeing that it meets the CEQA exemptions. And then the other question, sorry, I wrote a lot of questions. Are you guys okay with the value of that highly protected tree, the assessment of the value?
Yeah, so our their project arborist evaluated it, and then our city consulting arborist kind of reviewed it and okayed it. And so, given that the two experts have reviewed it, then we're okay with it.
All right, those are my questions. Does the applicant have a presentation or want to comment? Technology.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Mitani with Shelter Architects. Thanks for having us back.
Welcome.
I'm going to go through, since Haley did a great job of the overall presentation, hit on some of the major points. We have our landscape architect that will do the same. But just in case you have any questions, the owner is here from the development side as well as operations. And online, we have our civil engineer and our arborist to take any questions should you need them. So I'm just highlighting a few points. I don't know if you can see those, but Haley touched on probably one of the major points of discussion last time, which was the entry up at the corner, which is circled. Right now, we have an entry on the left-hand side from Rossmore Parkway, and then we have one on the upper right over at the end of the cul-de-sac on Parkway Court. We felt it was necessary with all the discussion about safety to eliminate that corner entry. So we've done so on that. There's some discussion about the drop-off area. We've kind of reshaped that whole area so there's a little bit easier ingress and egress. So you would come in off of Parkway, you would come into the drop off at the entry, and then head out to the right-hand side all the way to the other side to the cul-de-sac. And then I have three areas circled. We have signage that we're talking about, but that will be under separate permit per the staff report, and that'll be covered in a separate application. Parking, you can see on the right-hand side, kind of in our tabulation, we have 64 required parking spaces. Last time when we went through the study session, we had 67. As Haley mentioned, we increased that to 76 cars. We parked all of our cars that were required on site, but we also have 11 cars on the cul-de-sac street. And as requested, we moved those over to the right side of the street as opposed to the median on the left-hand side, which they're presently parking at. A couple items here. Bottom area, we have some amenity spaces. We have our main dining room and activity room. We're opening those up with folding glass doors. That'll open out to that kind of triangular patio area, which looks down the side of the slope, and our landscape architect will talk about the enhancements that we've done there. A couple of added elements that we've introduced where I've called enhanced loggias, one in the memory care courtyard, mainly to provide some additional shade to the common dining area there. And then up on the right-hand side in the big courtyard, there's a linear courtyard or a linear loggia, which connects the lobby entry to kind of that node in the center of the building. Haley talked pretty accurately about what was going on with this corner. As you recall, that funny left-hand corner with the red area, it was shortened is probably the best way to say, with the parapets in order to make that work with the height of the 30.5 feet. But it really introduced kind of an unfortunate look at what happens at the top of the roof line. There was a lot of stepping, and then there was a real reduction in that parapet height. So what we've done, So what we've done is we wanted to try to maintain the consistency of that mansard parapet, and that's what is shown in our proposed elevations. Just a reminder on kind of the inspiration of what we worked with on for the elevations. We went with more of a modern, very clean, not really fussy detailing for a building, kind of wine country farmhouse or modern farmhouse imagery. And then some of the areas that Haley did point out, mainly the main entry. There was a lot of discussion about the height of our base with our stone not being the right scale to a person that's standing there. We've lowered that. We've introduced stone all along the streetscapes, on both streetscapes, on Parkway and Parkway Court, at the base of the gables. We've simplified the palette. Last time it was a little more white and beige and brown. We've kind of gone to a little bit gray and white scheme, a little darker roof, and then on these gables in the middle elevation, just to provide some variety as opposed to having 3 or 5 white gables marching along. We've introduced a little color to break that up as well. There was some discussion on the Rossmore Parkway elevation at the bottom with these bays that were rather pronounced. And I think a lot of that had to do with what Haley showed earlier about that reduced parapet and really making a high focus on the tops of those gables, because that mansard was about half the size and the gable tips were actually pulling out on top of that. So we feel that kind of feels a little more engaged as far as the bays with the roof right now. These were 2 elevations that you hadn't seen before. The top one is the west elevation. We've carried along the idea of the memory care wing having bays along the top, just as it is from the left-hand side of that top elevation as it wraps around to the street. Introduce some stone along the backside for the community or the common areas. And it's a little deceiving when you look at the long roof line there, because really from the stone to the right is what's really facing you. You can't see kind of the edge of the slope, but everything to the left of that stone base is really receding away from you to the right, or receding away from you to the left. A couple of redone renderings. Probably the most important thing here, what we did was there was discussion about how that tower, or the elevator tower, was engaging. It was totally not engaged with the gable in the previous version. We had gable for the entry, we had a gap. So what we've done is we've kind of merged that almost like a chimney element to fit into that gable and tuck that in. This is a new sheet for you. The color palette, you can see it's the white and the grays. We're introducing some stone at the bases that's in keeping with the palette, a darker roof, and some windows that are on the darker side as well. And then there was some questions about details at the last study session, so we've included those as far as window details, some bay details. We have a lot of trellis elements on these gables. Those trellis elements are pretty sturdy. We had to work with the fire department just to make sure that when you lay a ladder on that you can actually lay a ladder and have a firefighter access those windows and stand on top of those. And then I'm going to pass this on to the landscape, but I did want to touch on one item as far as the noise for the units above. So here you see a pretty interesting diagram about how we looked at the noise. So you can see there are decibel readings in the middle, 0 to 140. So the listings at the top What we generally try to do for outdoor noise level is about 65 decibels. That equates to like a 30-mile-an-hour car driving in front of you. Our HVAC range on the roof is anywhere between 48 and 59 decibels. From 300 feet away, which is the nearest neighborhood that we were talking about, the nearest neighbors were at, it drops to about 15 to 35, which is kind of in the library range. So we feel pretty comfortable with placing those units on top. Thank you, and I will move it over to Morgan Burke, our landscape architect. Sorry, Morgan.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Morgan Burke. I'm with the Gazzardo Partnership for the Landscape Architects. Like Dave said, thanks for having us back. I'm going to touch on the high points in the landscape design as it's progressed since the study session last year. What I want you to consider on this overall site plan that I'm showing here first is that we wanted to touch on the fact that the stormwater treatment planters have been fully coordinated with the civil engineer and that they've been put into the, incorporated fully into the landscape design as well. The next slide here shows the two interior courtyards. The courtyard on the left is the memory care courtyard. And initially, the building amenity space on the lower side of the courtyard used to not, it didn't open up onto the courtyard itself. And the architect has changed that, so now it opens up onto the courtyard, and they've incorporated that arcade or that loggia element. And so we've responded by providing a outdoor dining area or seating area adjacent to that activated use area in the building. And we also have a trellis extension coming off of the loggia just to provide an additional shade in that location. Originally, we had shown.
Sorry to interrupt. Since we hit your time, can you just quickly hit the highlights?
I can. So a lot of the changes happened in the memory care courtyard. We had community planters. We got rid of that. Now we have a circular walkway through there, and we've added additional seating. We have a radial seating element in that tuck-in space on the north side of the courtyard. The memory care courtyard, the programming didn't really change. Just the elements were shuffled to make the space function a little better. We moved the kitchen, the outdoor kitchen adjacent to the walkway underneath the loggia, and that allowed us to center the fireplace in the space and make it work a little bit better. But we also have a seating in that location as well. All right. Just want to touch on briefly in the front entry. There was a lot of talk about not a nice sense of arrival. We've retained the accent paving there. There will be a zero curb event there, so we'll have the truncated domes and bollards, and then we want to take that accent paving and bring it up into the pedestrian realm, and it'll go all the way to the front door. We've added planter pots and benches and bike racks, and then you can see little red dots in there. That's potential public art locations that we're studying. The back terrace, you can see the dining, the additional outdoor dining space that is adjacent to the building, where we have the swing outdoors. We have a trellis element that comes off the building there to provide shade, and then an additional kind of lounge seating area adjacent to it. And then more bench seating along the pathway to the back of that terrace. I think there's just images of the character, matching the architecture. You know, this is that's the memory care on the left, and then the dining terrace you can see on the right. Just more character. I think I'm actually our presentation is going to end, but. We're here for questions. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much. So now it's time for commissioners for questions of the applicant. How about Vice Chair Killian?
Yeah, overall, I like what you've done. I just have a few questions. Regarding the architecture, my only question at this point is the main entry. Could you explain a little bit more in detail the changes you've made with that entry? My concern, as I remember, was the scale of it, and I don't really see, other than lowering the stone base, what change was really made there architecturally. I understand your comment about the gap, the chimney and all that, but was there really any right there, that,
Yes. Other than moving, I think there was a lot of discussion about that stone being really high. It was like over 6 or 7 feet high. So we brought that across both faces of the street sides and brought that down to scale. I think there was some discussion on the light fixtures not quite being in scale, so we've increased those. We have brought some lighting elements hanging in the center from the second story space. And really, I think the thing that really has changed is the engagement of that stone, where it was much more vertical, the gable, with this gable to the gap to the stone tower. And so I think that engagement has helped not only the tower element, but has helped the main gable as well.
did you ever look at such a large element going up, they were extending perhaps like a porte cochere over the drop-off zone, giving a little bit more protection and breaking up that large, almost 3-story element?
We looked at that, but we felt that, it's already pulling out, like about 10 feet already. To pull that out over the top of the drop-off area is really pulling out the scale of our largest element out toward the street. What we've been doing in the most recent projects is we've kind of been getting away from these covered porte cocheres to engage it a little bit more with the building, because it really works during inclement weather pretty nicely, where we can pull the car up. You're still under a little bit of covered area, and then you can get in. But really, our biggest concern was the scale of our biggest element on the project, pulling out 20 or 20 more feet out off of that building.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the whole scale of it, but if you look at your top elevation, you have a little shed roof or on the left of that element, and maybe at that height, continuing some sort of a protective covering over the drop-off zone. So again, you break up that,
So you're saying pulling it out a little bit
well,
more
not the whole
forward?
massing, I'm just saying maybe a roof element or something to break up. My concern is you have almost a 3-story element going straight up, and I think it just dwarfs the people there. It's out of scale, so I'm trying to figure out, how you looked at that and if there's any other studies to break up that.
Well, I think we carried the height up just to make it a little bit more pronounced. It is at the corner. You can come from both streets and be able to see that element as kind of a destination type of device to see where to actually go. We could probably pull that, if you're concerned with kind of the scale of that, we could probably make that work by pulling that scale down a little bit on that. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. I think the proportions will still work out on that. But other than that, I think the 1-story porch element on the left-hand side at 1 story is probably appropriate. Probably wouldn't want to pull that up to the 2nd story. It is a little bit of more covered area for somebody to wait and I think we have some benches in there just in case people want to wait and wait for their car to arrive. But we can certainly look at the scale of that element. I'd be fine dropping that a few feet.
Okay. Just a question on the parking on the, I guess it would be the northeast corner. You go from perpendicular parking to you have, I think, 4 parallel parking. I was just kind of curious why that happened. It didn't appear that the building forced that, unless I'm missing something.
That's where the arrow is pointed right now. One of the reasons there is that you probably can't see it too closely, but we have a retaining wall in order to make, this isn't a flat site, and so in order to make this grade work, our civil engineer is working with the grades there. So if we did head in, we'd lose probably another 10 feet in that area, and what we wanted to do is be able to retain that up against the building, because obviously our building has to be the same floor level for seniors.
Okay, great. I have some landscape questions. You had mentioned at the beginning of your presentation about the stormwater. I was kind of curious, you have a lot of trees, 24-inch box trees in there. Given that you only have 18 inches of soil over 18 inches of gravel, how do you propose on making that work? it seems like you're kind of limited on the trees.
Well, we could study it. I mean, I hear you on the soil depth that it's not adequate for a 24-inch box. So, I mean, the only alternative if we're going to keep the locations is to reduce the sizes of the trees that go inside the box to 15-gallon, and then or look for other places to put them. I understand it's tight.
How, I don't know if you work with the engineer, another possibility is to carve out some of the.
We could. That's a good idea, actually. You could.
Redo his calculations.
Yeah, you could. As long as you maintain the square footage, you could do carve-outs and put it in there. That's not a bad idea.
Okay, and if you go that way, let's see how you're going to do that with
Sure.
the details. Along the north end, I believe there's existing on both sides of the existing street and that center median island are London plane trees. I was kind of curious why you didn't, when you're taking out the London planes, you didn't keep them, or if you didn't keep them because of the sidewalk and the parking reconfiguration, why you didn't continue that same theme?
I think there's two things going on. I think one is because there's some trees that are in the stormwater treatment planter, so we had to pick varieties that Contra Costa County would approve in that space. But to your point, actually, if the platanus trees are fairly successful out there, like there's no reason why we couldn't put them back in there.
Okay, I mean, it just seems to carry out what's already established there instead of.
No, you're 100% right.
Yeah. Tying back into my question with the architect at the entry, I was a little bit concerned, with the massing. It's a solid wall going up almost 3 feet, and the tree you selected is almost a patio tree. It's not going to get much higher than 12 feet. I was just kind of curious. Maybe there was a better selection to help screen that or to help soften some of that.
Yeah, it's tricky because there's not there's not a lot of room for the canopy to get really established. So yeah, I understand the scale issue of having a small tree there, but that's something we can study. I get concerned that it'd be too tight to put anything in there of significance.
Or maybe go a different shape that's more columnar.
Sure.
On the southwest elevation, I'm a little bit concerned, as I understand it, those trees that you're showing on this graphic and also the architecture, they're all going to be removed, so there's not going to be any existing vegetation to screen that. And I don't see where you're proposing any vegetation, so that whole elevation is going to be exposed.
Along the south dining terrace?
It'd be the southwest corner, or the elevation, not on the south, but the one that's at the angle now, that's neighboring the property to the, what would that be? Southwest.
Where the walk is on the west
Yes.
side here?
Yes.
Oh, there's a large crib wall that's on the site, so it'd be difficult to plant any vegetation there.
I know, but what I'm concerned, what's there when you're driving by that softens the existing building is all the pines and the trees there, and all that is being wiped out from the arborist report.
I mean, it's a challenge. I understood. It's a challenge because I need to balance site access back there with the sidewalk, plus I need to get stormwater treatment up against the building because I need to pick up the rainwater leaders that are happening right there. So to get something of scale that's out there right now is difficult.
Right, but perhaps there could be a balance, again, maybe shifting the stormwater or it doesn't have to be a continuous landscape, but I think to leave that whole elevation without any type of large screening is going to be a mistake.
I think it's something. There's also a good neighbor fence that's running along that edge too, so that'd be another element we have to balance. But I think that's something we can certainly look at, looking at how that walk runs through there, and if there's pockets that we can create where we can put some significant plant material, that's something we can definitely look at.
Okay. And my last question is, at the last meeting, I was concerned, I wanted more of a plan specifically on the lower elevations, the shrubs and the ground covers rather than a green wash to understand what you're doing. We didn't really get that, but I was kind of curious how you do your water calculations at this stage if none of the plants are identified, how do you know that that area is a low, medium, or high?
We grouped it by hydrozone, so we'll have to select. We're locked into selecting plants that work with the hydrozones that we provided.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Newsom.
I mean, not much else other than to echo. I picked up immediately that the stormwater really needs to be worked out in a way, because it doesn't show up here, and these things are of a scale now where they really have to be part of the plan. I think you've addressed that in your comments. Echoing what he said about the entry structure, I can see the progression in the change. I think my only comment there would be, being an architect, I mean, are you actually going to get protection? I like the scale of the overall limit, but I don't believe you're going to get protection of the people as they come in. I mean, if there's a wind-driven rain, there's going to be water all the way into the front doors there. So you might want to introduce some, as he was suggesting, something that I don't think the scale of the overall element should be brought down, but I think, if you had some kind of a canopy or something that could project maybe a little further so that you would actually get a sense of arrival. If I think of myself arriving in a car here, I don't know where I would stop, because it's kind of blocked by the building. I mean, that's all I really have.
Thank you. Commissioner Case.
Yeah, I had a quick question on the landscape, although it may have been addressed. It sounds like you're putting in a retaining wall on the same southwestern edge that Commissioner Killian was mentioning. If you're looking at that, do you think there would be an opportunity to save that tree 131 that's in that walkway?
We're not. Well, I take that back. I misspoke. There might be a small site wall there. There might be an opportunity to have the walk go around that tree, but it's going to affect the stormwater treatment that we have right there. So that's something we'll have to study to see if we can do it to save it.
Okay, that was my only question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And that leads us to public comment on this project. Is there anyone in the chamber who wishes to address the commission on this particular project? And do we have anybody on Zoom? And if you're on Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature. I think I see a raised hand.
There we go. Jonathan Betts.
Hi, my name is John Bates. My wife Karen is with me. And as you look at the plans, the closest lot that you can see is my yard. I'm right across the street. I've always been very, very concerned about noise. And recently I've become very concerned about parking. As I look at the plans, the number of units, I'm doing some quick calculations, and I think every shift of workers could be as high as 40. Do you have 40 parking spaces for employees in your lot? Another question.
I'm seeing some nods out from the applicant.
You do? There are 40 reserved spaces for your employees. Every employee has a spot.
I'm seeing a yes from the applicant.
Okay. And how many cars do you anticipate your residents are going to have? That leaves them only 36.
I'm seeing a 0, but we're not really allowed to do a Q&A dialogue during public comment. We can basically listen, and we can refer this off if you need us to.
Okay, next comment, exterior lighting. There's an awful lot of exterior lighting already in this area. The DeVita parking lot, the parking lot across the street over at Manor Care. The street lighting is huge.
And we can see the HVAC from we're above the whole complex. So we're looking down on this building and we'll see the HVAC, and we don't think it's 300 feet from our property to the air conditioning unit. So we're going to see it and we're going to hear it.
Is there going to be, I'm hoping there's going to be a phone number provided straight to maintenance for us that are across the street in the neighborhood, in case there's a slipping fan belt or something like that.
And can you put it in a different part of the building so it's not right next to our house?
So we're not going to be able to get those questions answered at this point. Thank you for your comments. We've run out of time for your comments. If you reach out to planning staff, we can probably get your questions to the applicant.
I can help address, after public comment, I can help address some of those too.
Okay, great, thank you. Do we have anybody else on Zoom who wishes to speak?
Is there anybody else that wishes to raise their hand? Okay, seeing none.
All right, we will close public comment on this particular project. So that leads us to commissioner comments. Commissioner Case?
I can go. So I really think it's improved a lot since the last time we saw it. I think the circulation is so much better. I'd love to have you guys consider the bioretention and maybe keeping that tree and the experience on that southwest edge. Also because I think Commissioner Newsom mentioned your arrival is that side of the building. So maybe if there's an opportunity to keep a nice mature tree or have some kind of landscape buffer there, that would really help. I like a lot of the programming and design that we're seeing in the interior spaces. I think the expansion of that southern terrace is really great. I think that's going to give a lot of great views, and I appreciate a lot of the usability you guys are programming. I like the scale of the arrival element, and I figure it's like barely raining here anymore, so I don't think there needs to be a lot of changes to that, in my opinion. So that's it. Thank you.
Has she seen some of the downpours we had?
Commissioner Newsom?
Well, I'd just say maybe do a little fine tuning of that arrival element to make it so you can actually see it when you arrive. I don't think you can.
Vice Chair Killian?
I agree with previous commissioners' comments, with the exception, I do think the entry needs a little bit more work. Again, something to break that up, and I would like to see that as a condition, not just for them to study it. And again, I agree with Phil's comment, it doesn't necessarily have to be brought down or not, but maybe going up halfway, breaking it up with some sort of a overhang. I think it would be beneficial to the people coming in and out too. Some of them aren't that nimble and take a little bit more time. So again, running in and out of the rain, I think is problematic. I think the landscape needs work. I think it was just kind of put together, and I think there's a lot of details that could make it a better project when you actually look at really what's happening there on the elevations and the stormwater treatment. I don't think we should view the stormwater. I know it's a requirement, but again, let's not shove the landscaping aside. Let's work with the engineer and maybe move those stormwater. It may not be possible, but let's look at it and let's just not say that we can't put a tree there because there's a stormwater basin there. And I am concerned about the southwest elevation with no landscaping there at all. I like the idea of perhaps saving I think you said it was tree 131, the massing there. That's what you're going to see as you're driving up Rossmore Parkway. So I think it's important to keep that tree. So I think the landscaping, I would like to see that if we approve it tonight to come back, maybe on a subcommittee level to look at it. But otherwise, I'm in favor of the project.
All right, thank you. And my comments at a high level, I think it's a great repurpose of a vacant, unattractive building right now. I think overall, I do really like the architecture. I like the color palette. I like the materials. As a non-architect, I like what you've done with the entryway. I think it's a big improvement from where it was before. It looks better. It makes more sense to me. But I think I agree with Vice Chair Killian. There's probably a little bit more that can be done with that. just as a comment on the trees in general on this project, it's kind of interesting. We have one highly protected tree that, I think that's tree 131, and if we take that tree down, the city gets $2,650. But I just took a quick scan of the trees that are being taken down, and there are 6 other trees that are valued at $200,000, and they're going away, and we're not seeing any thing going into the tree preservation fund. And that's how the rules are, but I just wanted to officially point out that it's kind of a shame that, you know, we just take down 200,000, and it's a lot more. It's, if you add everything up, down, and then we're just worried about a $2,600 tree. It's a little bit of an irony. That being said, I completely agree with the comments that the southwest elevation, to the extent we can have more vegetation or trees there, some kind of natural barrier, I think would make it much more attractive. I think one thing we have not discussed tonight so far is the public art location. I think you're looking for a recommendation.
It just needs to be some comments, or if you have any comments, the Arts Commission will be looking at a lot more detail with it. But just to, they like to know that the Design Review Commission has at least reviewed potential locations.
Got it. Do we want to do any of the commissioners have comments on the public art location? Can we maybe put that slide back up real quick?
I think the 3 that they were shown was at the front entry, which I agree with. I mean, it's going to get the most visibility, so I agree with any one of those 3 locations.
I think one of the 3 wasn't really at the entry. It was out at like the corner, which I thought was going to get lost.
You know what page the art things are showing?
I don't know. I think Haley will bring it up.
Sheet L 1.3 shows it, yeah.
Thought, yeah. So
So 1, 2, 3, yeah.
yeah, there's
So that one you're worried about?
yeah. To me, that one seemed like, at least from this viewpoint, it looks like it might not be very visible to folks. Versus like my preference was the one looking at that picture to the far right. Do the other commissioners have any preferences or comments on it besides Vice Chair Killian?
I agree with you.
Yeah, that one may be the most likely to get lost, although I sometimes think, depending on what they do for the art, maybe that serves a purpose for that space. So I think these are fine.
Great.
Agree.
Okay, thank you. So that gives you some commentary on the public art location. And I'll just add a final comment would be, to the extent you've heard a little bit of feedback from the public tonight and a little bit at the last hearing, at the study session, I should say, to do everything you can to address, you know, I heard sort of 3 themes. They're worried about parking, they're worried about lighting, not just your project, but all the surrounding lighting, and then worried about looking at and hearing HVAC units. But I'm in support of the project. So now is the time for motions and voting. Haley, do you have a bulleted list of the things you want us to consider in a motion?
I can bring up the list of changes. I'll just note that there were no, in staff's recommendation, there were no kind of additional recommendations other than what's in the resolution.
Okay. Then I think I heard I heard from Vice Chair Killian that he would like a condition on the entry design, if we're going to approve the project tonight, and then a subcommittee to look at overall landscape. So that's what's sticking out to me. So does anybody have a motion they want to make?
I'll move that we approve this project, Y21-079, with the added condition that the front entry element be revised to I don't necessarily want to bring it back to delay it. So again, if the other commissioners are comfortable, I'm comfortable with staff looking at, but what the intent is to not necessarily reduce the overall scale, but if you add more elements that visually scale it down, I would be happy with that. Hopefully the applicant understands where I'm coming from on that one. And then I would like to condition that the landscape plan be resubmitted to a subcommittee of one that I'll volunteer unless the other commissioners want to do it. And that the art can be one of, do we decide 3 positions, or do we scale it down to 2? Is there any?
I was in favor of the 2 that were closest.
Okay, I'll put that in motion, that the Art Commission consider the 2 locations adjacent to the front entry. And let's see, are we dealing with anything else? No, I guess that's it. That's my motion.
And is that motion, before we take a vote on that, for Commissioner Case and Commissioner Newsom, is that a reasonable motion to vote on, or do you want to add comment or change it? Or suggest? Okay.
Captures it.
Okay, great. Then can we? Yeah, good point. I'll make a second. Thank you. Can we take a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Newsom,
Yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
Chair Krelling.
Yes. All right, motion carried, unanimous. All right, moving on to our next public hearing. It's item 4B, the Walden Garden Townhomes. Design review, density bonus, tree removal permit, tree drip line encroachment permit, and subdivision, application number Y20-052. Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Simmer Gill, Associate Planner with the City, and we are here tonight to discuss the proposed 8-unit Walden Townhome development that's located at 1394 Walden Road. This project did come before this commission in October of 2021. The DRC and members of the public expressed some concerns and made comments. The applicant has since then revised the plans, so what I will do is reintroduce the project and go over the changes since you last saw it. And the project team, the developer Habib Sidnia, and the project architect, the civil engineer, are all here tonight. And I believe the project arborist is available via Zoom, Jennifer So. And from the city, we have myself, and we have Ryan Cook from the city's public works department, and also Claire Lai from the city attorney's office. To quickly go over the project site, the parcel is located along the north side of Walden Road, and the property line parallels Shady Lane. The project site comprises of 2 parcels, which includes the west property line. The project site comprises of 2 parcels, which includes 1394 Walden and the small strip of land that you see on the aerial map. And both parcels combine total 19,177 square feet. And the site is currently developed with a home that was built in the 1930s that will be demolished for proposed construction. And the adjacent parcels to the west and east are zoned multifamily, however, are developed with single-family homes. The Walden Commons 50-unit townhouse development is located directly to the rear of this property, and to the south are single-family homes that are zoned residential. And to the both to the west and the east, there are a mix of multifamily and residential zones. And typically, the design of any new project is approved by the DRC. However, this project is unique due to the Walden overlay zone, which requires City Council approval of the design review, as indicated on the overlay zone, which is included as attachment 7 of your agenda packet. And we are here tonight to get DRC's input on the redesign and a positive recommendation to City Council for this development. And please note that this is a SB 330 project, which means if the project is consistent with the objective standards, the city cannot deny the project without making certain findings that are required under state law. And SB 330 also shortens project review time to a maximum of 5 hearings if the project is compliant under state law. So this is our second public hearing tonight. This project still needs to go before City Council for final design review and Planning Commission for the tentative map. DRC can comment on the project as normally done by this commission. However, SB 330 does prevent the city from enacting new regulations or imposing design standards that would otherwise impact the housing units that are allowed for the project. And as proposed, the project complies with the objective design standards for multifamily projects that are outlined in the objective design standards checklist. Again, it's included as attachment 3 of your agenda packet. And the project also includes a low-income unit under density bonus law. And on October 20th of 2021, the project appeared before this commission for a study session. The Design Review Commission and members of the public expressed concerns with the project. The DRC provided comments on the site layout and the design and asked the applicant to consider keeping the existing trees or plant more trees on site, and also consider reducing the excessive pavement and minimize the number of waivers that were requested. The DRC also stated that the courtyard did not feel like a community space as it was located in the central drive aisle of between the central drive aisle. And the Design Review Commission also mentioned that more screening could be provided in the backyards, and also asked if a circular driveway is required and if other design options were considered, and to show how the project architecture integrates with the surrounding area and if a 3-story design is compatible with the surrounding area. DRC also asked if the units could be a bit smaller and would that impact the viability of their project. The applicant has revised the plans and redesigned the layout of the building to address the comments, which we will go over in the next few slides. And here is an exhibit of the previously proposed site layout, and then, of course, the new revised site layout. The plans were revised to create a single central drive aisle, providing shared access to the 4 buildings and eliminating the 20-foot wide circular driveway, and to address DRC comments and also some of the neighbor concerns about proximity to their property, particularly the property on the east. The buildings have been shifted inwards, creating more space along the perimeter of the site. The intent of the redesign was to reduce the excessive pavement, incorporate more green space, and a courtyard area that could be used by the residents. The redesign has added more usable space on the ground level and has created bigger backyard space for each unit. The previous central courtyard space near the vehicle drive aisle has been changed to include a 600 square foot courtyard space that is located in the open space area between the 2 buildings on the west. And although the courtyard space is no longer a focal point of this development, it is for the use of the residents and for the children to play safely away from incoming vehicles. I believe that was also a comment that was raised, if not by Design Review Commission, definitely by members of the public. And due to the changes to site layout, the front entry of Unit 8 has now changed and faces Walden Road. And each unit in 3-story buildings ranges from 1,200 square feet to 1,500 square feet of livable area. And all units include covered private entry porches, 2-car garages, and more than 200 square feet of fenced-in yards. And units 5 and 8 that are located in buildings 3 and 4 will also have second-floor decks that are now facing the interior drive aisle. And 17 parking stalls were required for this project, and they are provided on site. One of the stalls located in the north end of the site is designated as guest parking. The objective design standards requires that a portion of the required number of parking stalls be dedicated to guest parking. The ratio is 0.15 spaces per dwelling unit, which rounds out to 1 guest parking space that is required. And that is provided on site to the north end of the property. and no additional guest parking is required for this project per the Muni Code or per the objective design standards. And since the applicant is providing an affordable unit, it qualifies for density bonus. And the density bonus law allows a relief from the city's development standards through waivers if the development standards preclude the proposed development on site. Sorry. Initially, 4 waivers were requested, and the applicant has made efforts in addressing DRC comments and has removed the waiver for the required overlay zone, which is the 6-inch step back from for building height over 10 feet. So that was for the 2nd and 3rd floor, which needed to be stepped back along the east property line. So what the applicant did is they relocated the entire building 15 feet away, where only the 2nd and 3rd floor needed to be stepped back to meet that 6-inch requirement. And in the initial plans, the 3rd floor was not meeting that step back requirement, which needed 15 feet, but they were proposing 10. Overall, the project was designed to comply with all of the development standards and lot coverage requirements of the multifamily zone. However, per the overlay zone, the maximum floor area for less than 1 acre lots is limited to 0.40. And that FAR restriction is unique to the overlay. There are no FAR or floor area ratio restrictions in the multifamily zoning district. So the waiver request to eliminate the restriction of the overlay is required to build this project at the proposed FAR of 0.57. The other 2 waivers, distance between buildings and the courts requirement, could essentially be waived by the highest approving body if the commission could determine that such distances are not necessary for the maintenance of light, air, and privacy for the individual units, and that the proposed courts distance also allows sufficient sunlight and visual access. As you can see on this exhibit, building 3 and 4 meet the distance requirements, and buildings 1 and 2 provide sufficient distance, approximately 12 feet between each building, and there is a few feet of overlap for the 20-foot courts requirement for living room windows, as shown on this exhibit. As they're looking into each other, they both need 20-foot distance, but there's a little bit of overlap. But for the most part, it does meet the intent behind sufficient sunlight, visual access, and privacy. I also wanted to bring to your attention that typically in the M2.5 zone, the interior setback is 5 feet, which you see here. And in this case, they have a street side yard, which requires 10 feet. And the way we determine the distance between buildings is we take the sum of both yards. So in this case, they need 15-foot separation because they have a 10 and a 5. Typically, for another project in the same zone, and if they had 2 interior lots, they would only need a 10-foot distance. So again, they're very restricted due to having that street side yard. Overall, staff does support the proposed waivers and would like DRC to comment. And now moving on to the building design, the applicant has not made any changes to the color and materials palette, which consists of a mix of materials such as fiber cement horizontal siding, board and batten and smooth stucco siding, and standing seam metal roofs. The applicant has stated that the selected color and materials are compatible with other multifamily development in the vicinity, and I believe the applicant will be making a presentation tonight and will share some photographs of the surrounding neighborhood. The plans do show a contemporary architecture with a variation in colors and materials on all 3 levels. The floor plans for each building consist of 3 levels, and the recessed front entry of each unit is highlighted with stacked stone veneer, and the 2nd floor decks on units 5 through 8 consist of wood and metal railings, and metal awning projections are included on many of the windows. The combination of flat and pitch roof lines architecturally enhances the design of the buildings, and the street-facing elevations also incorporate a variation in materials, and overall the project does comply with the design standards that are outlined in the Objective Design Standards checklist. And here is an elevation drawing of what the building would look like fronting Walden Road. With the redesign, the massing of buildings 1 and 2 has been reduced, and It does create a little bit of a less top-heavy appearance as the entire building has been pushed away from the side yard, and the building appears to be stacked more vertically now. And due to the site redesign, the layout of Building 4 has changed, and the entry doors of Unit 8 are now located along the south elevation, which is facing Walden Road. So since both Units 1 and 8 are visible from the street, staff does recommend that more design detailing and articulation be considered, given that the primary entry of Unit 8 is now street-facing, and more windows could be considered on the first level of Unit 1, as it appears more of a blank facade on the ground floor along this elevation as well. And here is the rear north elevation. This would face the Walden Commons townhouse development to the north. Also, new trees are being planted along the perimeter of the entire site, providing that necessary screening. Initially, they were only proposing 3 trees, so the overall site lacked plantings. And here is the east elevation, which would face the closest residential property. And to address DRC comments and neighbor concerns about the privacy and proximity to that property, the redesign has added more usable space along the perimeter and creating bigger backyard space for each unit, as the entire buildings for Units 1 and 4 have been located 15 feet away. And again, as I mentioned earlier, only 5 feet setback is required on the ground floor. However, the entire building has been stepped back or set back 15 feet. To address this, however, to address many of the privacy concerns of the closest neighbor, even the ground floor building is now located farther away. And as requested by DRC, more screen trees have been planted along the east property line. And here is the west elevation, which faces the private street Shady Lane. With the new layout, there is a 28-foot separation between buildings 3 and 4, allowing 600 square feet of courtyard or gathering space between the 2 buildings. And overall, the building designs are compliant with the design standards for multifamily development, and as required by SB 330, as the elevations do provide visual balance and proportions in building mass, and also window alignments. And the variation in materials, colors, and roofline articulation is evident throughout this project. And here is the previous landscaping plan. Initially, the applicant was proposing only 3 new trees, and now with the redesign and the shifting the buildings is resulting in more space, which allows for more tree plantings. Also, the 2 off-site Chinese elm trees on the east neighbor's property will now be protected. Initially, they were being impacted, and either a authorization would have been required from the owner to remove those trees. And the 2 existing on-site oak trees, which are circled here in green on this exhibit, will also be saved. 12 new trees consisting of 24-inch crepe myrtles and Brisbane trees will be planted, and 1 36-inch oak tree is also proposed. And a row of 15-gallon juniper trees will be planted along the west property line to provide a buffer, and a mix of 5-gallon shrubs will be scattered throughout the site. And now moving on to the tree removals, a total of 10 on-site trees that measure over 9 inches in diameter are subject to the city's tree preservation ordinance, of which 8 are being removed for a proposed project. DRC requested that efforts be made to save the on-site trees, and there are also 3 off-site trees on the adjacent neighboring property along the east that were impacted. And the on-site oak tree number 43, which was also being removed initially, is now being preserved. With the redesign, the 2 off-site Chinese elm trees will be protected. The tree removals and drip line encroachment permits for tree 31 and the drip line encroachment permits, if needed for the off-site trees, will be reviewed and approved by the City Council. However, staff is requesting DRC's input. And just to summarize, staff is supportive of the overall project along with the waivers, as the applicant has made efforts to not only address DRC comments, but also tried to design the project to address neighborhood comments as well. And the project is compatible with the multifamily development that is found in the surrounding area. However, as mentioned earlier, more design detailing and articulation along the front elevation of Unit 8 could be considered. Staff believes the pavement could also be reduced further if more landscaping is required, as it is still over 36 feet of pavement on site, and the vehicle turnaround only requires 25 feet. Additionally, placing a wheel stop in front of the guest parking stall north of Unit 5 may prevent cars from going over the new landscaping and proposed trees. And staff is requesting DRC's input on the proposed site redesign and also staff's comments. And with that, staff does recommend that the DRC comment on the redesign of the Walden Garden Townhome development and provide a positive recommendation to City Council for the design review of this project. And for the record, staff did receive 2 emails from neighbors. One that expressed support of the project, basically saying that it's quite similar to the 6-unit townhouse development located on Jones Road. And he also had some comments or wanted to know if the applicant would be providing additional guest parking. And then the second letter I received, the email expressed some concerns related to noise, construction activity in residential neighborhoods, and I did respond to both of those emails, and a copy of that email with my responses is provided to all of the commissioners, as well as copies for the public tonight. And with that, I conclude my presentation, but I will be here for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Simmer. Now it's time for questions of staff, if anybody. Commissioner Case.
Yeah, I have a question. So the walkway that is being provided on Walden Road, it was mentioned in some of the previous comments that doesn't connect to anything. So is there anything dictating that needs to be there?
Correct. So we did, this was a requirement by the city's engineering department, Public Works, but I did go back after you raised that question to the city engineer, and yes, it is required as part of, given that there are no sidewalks on Walden Road, but in the future, if there ever is going to be designing the property properly to comply with the 5-foot sidewalk width.
Okay. Yeah. And it's shown as pavers. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Newsom.
I'm good. Nothing.
Commissioner Killian. Vice Chair Killian, excuse me.
Could you explain the required distance on the main driveway going in? They're showing a distance of 36 feet. Is that excessive or more than is required?
The width, the driveway
Yes.
width, yeah, a minimum of 25 feet is required, so they could reduce that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just had one question. Do study sessions count as a public hearing in the 5?
Yes.
It does, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, does the applicant have a presentation?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Having a little bit of a difficulty? Thank you.
Call in the pros.
When we share the screen, it shows it up there, but we don't see it there.
It's the professionals.
It's still not right. Because I'm seeing it on the laptop, but they're seeing the window. It needs to reverse.
No worries. There we go.
Okay.
Don't touch anything.
Good evening, Chairman. Forgot your sorry, blanking.
Krelling.
Krentling, yeah. And Commissioners, my name is Ed Novak. I'm the architect of the project. I'll make a brief presentation followed by the landscape architect, and then the owners and development team are here to answer questions. We do have the landscape architect in person as well, and the arborist is, if there's questions for her, online. Do I advance with? Okay. The project before you proposes to build 8 townhomes, as Simmer mentioned, with attached 2-car garages with 1 on-site parking space for guests of the residents. Before I go too deep into my presentation, I just want to briefly go through the history of this project. We originally proposed a 7-unit project and worked with staff to bring it to the DRC level. But once we got scheduled to that, Simmer discovered this overlay zone 12, which then threw our project out of compliance with the zoning. And we had to step back and kind of rethink and adjust our position, which brought us to our second project that we did bring to the commission. It was an 8-unit project presented under SB 330 for the density bonus law. And we asked, as she mentioned, for waivers at that time. What we took away from that meeting was, we increased the units to 8. The project provided an affordable unit at below market rate. The applicant is granted the right under this bill to ask for waivers to the development standards that don't, where the project cannot comply to achieve this additional unit. These waivers were for the floor area ratio, the 3rd level side yard setback, the court area outside the living room, and the distance between buildings. What we took away from that meeting was the buildings were forced out to the perimeter of the site, primarily because of that double wide drive aisle, which also created too much paving and made for an unsafe community space. You told us to consider saving more trees and providing, as well as providing more trees. The bike rack was located too far from the project entry and was hard to find. The architecture was confusing with the use of too many materials and colors. And you also questioned if 3-story buildings were compatible with the surrounding area. Could the units be smaller? Is the sidewalk along Walden necessary? And is there another way to meet the project needs with less waivers? So now before you is our new project, which we've simplified quite a bit by using 4 duplex buildings alongside a central drive aisle. The amount of paving has been drastically reduced with this move, along with using more permeable surfaces, i.e. identifying walks along the buildings from the primary walk along Walden. We are proposing additional trees along the perimeter of the site, which you'll hear more from the landscape architect. And we created a common use space, as Simmer pointed out, between buildings 3 and 4 for the gathering and the use of children at play outside of vehicle traffic. We also relocated the bike rack to a more central location that is opposite that gathering space. As Simmer mentioned, we adjusted our architecture on buildings 1 and 2 to be less top-heavy. As you can see, once we moved the building farther away from the ground floor all the way up, we were able to kind of vertically stack our building more comfortably and make it a little more appealing from the south elevation. Getting to the questions about compatibility, here's 3 other multifamily projects within our same zone. In fact, all of them are within walking distance of where we're at, and they're all 3-story. They also represent a timestamp on their architecture. You can tell pretty much roughly when they were built, and they're not trying to replicate or duplicate someone else's act. You asked about reducing the size of the units. We feel these units are moderately sized for the marketplace, especially in this area. We did do some quick queries of size of units multifamily units in and around the area, and found the 2-bedroom units out there ranged from there was one at 800 square feet, a much older project, up to around 1,400, a little more than 1,400 square feet for some of the bigger 2-bedrooms. We're proposing 1,304 for our 2-bedroom unit. On the 3-bedroom units, they ranged from around 1,280 square feet on up to 2,500 square feet, and we're proposing 1,648. The room, especially in the living room spaces, they are very, I don't want to call them tight, but they are efficient in their square footage and kind of require combined living dining areas. Kind of addressing the distance between buildings that is in the objective design standard, as Simmer indicated, primarily for light and ventilation. This is the unit, the living level and the bedroom level of the units that are impacted by this 12.3 foot separation. As you can see, the main living area is one open space that has windows on all 3 sides. So even though we're maybe 3 feet less than what is required, I'm pretty sure there is going to be a minimal impact to the amount of light and ventilation that area gets. Likewise, on the 3rd floor, the main bedroom units face towards the courtyard, and we have secondary windows that are in that area. And I believe as well, the amount of light that would be coming through those windows anyway would not be diminished significantly because of the less dimension. This exhibit, which you saw in Samir's presentation, it represents the overlap of those required courtyard spaces. One of the reasons our paving is wider than it needs to be by code is we were trying to find that balance of these courtyard spaces trying to comply, which they do for the most part with the first 2 buildings on the lower side, and overlap up to 5 feet on the upper side, upper buildings. We could look at trying to integrate some planting pockets, but with garage frontages mostly happening on these buildings, there's very little opportunity, I think, to introduce ways to reduce that paving in there. I want to close I want to go through and talk about the sidewalk. We pretty much know from staff already it is a requirement of Public Works, and we did offer to post a bond for money to be there if and when the rest of Walden does get developed, but they prefer that go ahead and be built as part of our project. And since that was the case, we chose to make it a permeable material as well, to work with what we're doing on site. I want to talk about the waivers, the two waivers that apply to the air and light ventilation. I want to remind you, as Simmer indicated, they are discretionary elements that the highest level body reviewing it has the discretion of the way those, and I'm pretty sure this project would qualify for that waive. On the FAR, I want to talk briefly about the process we went through and considered several different development concepts.
Do you think you'll be able to?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. All of which with different plant types and unit mixes, we've pretty much came up to the same floor area ratio to make this project work. We are proposing at 0.57 versus the 0.4. I want to mention that the Jones Road project that was recently built and approved by this body is at 0.8 FAR. And they were able to do that primarily because the city removed the overlay zone on their property. And I know the adjacent single-family homes, are there on each side of us, but they are non-conforming uses at this time, and someday will be probably most likely a multifamily project similar to ours. So in closing, we presented a project back in October, which was denied positive recommendations, in my opinion, unnecessarily, but there was a lot of public input, and there was concern on the commission. We decided to take a look at those things, address them before moving this project forward.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Can the landscape architect address a couple of items?
Let's just see what comes up in questions, just because we've already gone over your time.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Do we have questions of the applicant? Go with, looks like Commissioner Case is raring to go.
Yeah, I see that there's the required sidewalk and there's some utilities, but I desperately want trees between Walden and the buildings. Did you guys wiggle that as much as you could to try to get something in there?
Hi, Annika Carpenter, landscape architect, Ripley Design Group. Yes, I believe we have utilities kind of all across the frontage there, but I can continue to look. I would like trees there as well.
Yeah, I think it would just help soften it. And I feel like you guys explained this with the imaginary 20 by 20 light box for the living room windows, but I keep finding myself with unit 1, 2, 3, and 4 wanting to take that row and straighten it out and narrow that central driveway. Is the reason that's not happening because of those imaginary 20 by 20 boxes, or is there more you can talk to about that? Because I would love to reduce that driveway. It's bugging me.
So yes, we left those buildings canted for two reasons. One, we didn't want our buildings to be parallel to each other, and two, it helped us, especially when we got back to buildings 2 and 3, where they did overlap 5 feet. You can see how if you rotated building 2 towards 3, that overlap would increase because it rotates down into the 20 by 20 box of unit 5.
And how much is it okay to overlap? Did you say it was 5 feet, or it's not supposed to overlap at all?
It's not, according to your standards, it's not supposed to overlap at all.
Okay.
However, the reviewing body has the discretion to determine if enough light and ventilation is provided, and privacy, I imagine, as part of that. That could be waived or considered, compliant.
And so that slight skew is also because you don't want them to be parallel, so they're not looking right at each other?
Yes.
And do you feel like that skew is enough to really deter that?
If I could skew it more, yes, it probably could help, but This particular skew works for the best alignment as far as if start rotating those buildings a little bit more, then my building distance between buildings 1 and 2 will get closer because the opposing corners are set at the setback lines, front and back.
Okay.
I know it's kind of hard to explain, but as it rotates, it pushes those two buildings will get pushed to get closer together.
Yeah. For the common area, that's the table and chairs and the little square space, is it possible to have more of that space be usable? Or are you envisioning it more of a garden? I mean, what's the programming for that?
So we're preserving that tree to the back. So it was difficult to put a whole lot of stuff underneath the canopy of that tree. We have 2 entries into those 2 units there. It felt every time I pushed and extended further, it felt like you were in there at their doorstep. So it was kind of I would push it, and then I tried to figure out a way to make it feel I tried to create a space where you could go there and you wouldn't feel like you were intruding on those 2 houses. So I thought visually more of a visual garden, and keep the space where you'd actually meet adjacent to the pedestrian thoroughfare, so that you didn't feel like you were in somebody's front yard, and you felt more like you were in the attached to the public part of the space. So it was a balancing act, and I think this was the best. This is the best location that I could, the best relationship that I came up with.
Would there potentially be an opportunity, other than just planting between someone's walkway to their front door and that space, to do, I don't know, like a low fence, like a split rail fence or something that's designating that separation of space?
I do have, planting. I was trying to create kind of that barrier, those plants that are kind of a light green on the top and the bottom of that space, to kind of designate their front walk to those 2 units as being very separated. So I hope I'm successful at that. It is it was a difficult task to try to fit something try to make it as usable as possible.
Yeah.
And so.
And it's not obvious to me in this moment, but I just want to ask, did you look for opportunities on the unit 1, 2, 3, 4 side to try to get in more landscape and break up some of that driveway experience?
Well, we also need to provide like ADA visitable access to the front doors. So the way that, we're providing a different treatment with the pavers, different color to try to identify pedestrian from vehicular access. And so it was kind of the safest, best way is to kind of put it up against the units. So if we can narrow this is something we can work on with architect and civil and try to see if there's any way to pull back from the house. If we're gonna, maybe we can't pull the buildings closer together, but maybe we can pull the paving closer together.
Yeah. Yeah, I just tend to find anytime you're putting the walkway right up against the building, it's not the nicest experience.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Commissioner Newsom.
More on that center driveway. I mean, I've been there myself. So, have you folks talked to the fire marshal about this yet? And because you're a 3-story building, right? You're going to have an articulated engine in there, swing the ladder around and such. Is that going to have to be wider?
It should not have to be any wider than what we show.
Okay. I mean, to me, narrow is better because it builds more buffer around the perimeter. And then just kind of another kind of landscaping question. I mean, are you, with the placement of the trees on the perimeter, are you considering where the windows are overlooking the adjacent properties, like particularly on the east side? There's a house there. Those windows are looking right over that house.
So the windows that face east, one's a kitchen window. The majority of them are light into stairwells where you're not, when you're standing at the landing, it's above your eye level. And I believe then there's one maybe small bathroom window that looks into that space. But we, in placing the trees along the perimeter, they were kind of allocated to protect views in towards the house, you know, the backyard and the house on the eastern side there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, thanks.
And Vice Chair Killian.
First of all, I want to echo Commissioner Case's questions and concerns. I had the same concerns, especially on the front. And there's I'm not quite sure on the left unit whether there's a window on the ground floor or not. On sheets A3 and 8.8, there aren't windows on the bottom floor, and you have a blank, kind of a stucco wall. But on your front elevation, you do show a window there. So is there a window on the bottom floor on that unit or not?
On the bottom floor of Unit 8, yes, there's windows. That unit repeats itself on, 5, 6, and 7.
If you go to sheet A3 is what,
Let's see. Oh, it's on your presentation, right? Yeah. Bring it back.
is it possible to go to sheet 8.3? Do you have that? Okay. Great. Technology, great.
When it works.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing.
Not this one?
Not this one. Well, this is fine. This is we're talking about this elevation along Walden Road.
Okay. So where the two young children on the left side are, there's a window there, but on the rest of your exhibits and the plan, that window is missing.
That window does occur all the time. That's a bedroom down there, downstairs.
Okay. But again, my concern, again, echoing Commissioner Case's concern, is looking at this, the street frontage. I think you get some higher elevation landscape that would help soften that. We're looking directly into the two garage doors, on these elevations. There's just a lot of wall element there along the frontage that concerns me. Let me move on. While you're up there, I think most of my, well, are you, can you answer the trash questions? Or is that a landscape question?
No, so
Okay, the way I understand it, it looks like on some of the units, they're in the garage, and all the trash units are gonna be put out right in front of the garage doors? Is that how they're gonna be picked up?
Yes.
Okay, don't you think, when I take my garbage out, I do it the night before because they come very early. and then all the people having to go to work in the morning with all those trash cans right in front of their garage doors. How do you think that's going to work out?
I can speak from experience because I live in a townhouse project even tighter than this. And we have to bring out 3 cans every trash collection day. And the alleys do get full of trash cans, but residents figure out a way to manage it. We have reviewed the trash plan with Republic. They have confirmed that they can work with our plan and, kind of support our direction. The plan is the bins will be stored in the private yards behind the units, not inside the garages. But when it comes trash day, they will be put out in front of each of their garage doors and separated enough that the residents opposite them have enough backup space to get out should they be going out prior to or after those cans have been placed out.
Okay, great. Let me go to landscape now.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, staying with the trash, but on a landscape level, how do you propose, it appears you have, I'm guessing they might be random flagstone, and they appear to be only about 2 feet wide, so I'm a little bit concerned how they're going to get their trash from the backyards to the front on your current landscape layout, if that's really viable or not.
I'm not sure if I knew about the trash cans in the backyard, so I can do a better job at adding a better access walk to get them out.
And my concern, I mean, some of those are pretty big, 3 feet square. So again, whether it wants to be a concrete 3-foot wide sidewalk or not. Next concern is, it appears you have a bike rack on the right-hand side, and the bike is orientated, shall we say, north to south. So again, whether that would be blocking the trash cans coming in and out or not there. And I guess my concern is whether that whole area really works at this scale. Is there another place where the bike rack could be located, or something else where there's not that conflict? Is there any other opportunities to?
I haven't looked at that, but I can. I'm open to moving it.
Okay. Let me pick up on Commissioner Case's on that common area. First of all, not the common area, but is it required to have a play area or this table, or is that just an amenity that you think is a good idea?
I believe it would be kind of the most usable kind of area. I believe that the neighbors would just kind of meet and hang out there, see each other, and just stop and.
Okay. I want to play devil's advocate a
Okay.
little bit. I don't think, we're using all these words, and play area for the kids and everything, but the reality is, this table is literally, 6 feet away from somebody's front door on both sides. I think it'd be very uncomfortable. People aren't going to go there and use it like we think it is on plan. And if it's not going to be usable, maybe it's better just to keep it into more of a landscaped area, being real about it rather than thinking that this is going to be a usable space. The other thing, I didn't see any details. It appears you were recommending movable rocking chairs. And again, I didn't know if this is being maintained by an HOA or whatever, who's responsible for that table and chair? And if a chair goes away, who replaces that? I didn't see any details or how all that was to be addressed.
Right. Well, I have worked on projects in the past where we've used rocking chairs, where we've actually bolted them to the ground with a bracket that allows them to move, but still they are in place.
Okay. I have a concern about that oak tree. Did you think of something else? My experience with oak trees, well, I know
Highly
everybody loves an
protected.
oak tree, but they're the messiest dang trees around, and they get quite large. So again, I don't know if that's appropriate in this space. The litter and the gutters, number one, the constant birds and squirrels and the mess that it creates. And I'm just wondering if we're doing a disservice to this common area with that tree. I know everybody likes an oak tree, but the reality is they probably belong out in some large open field. So is that a possibility? You think you might be able to come up with a different tree? Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, again, I'll do it on my comment time. Thank you.
When you were describing the oak tree, I thought you were describing my English walnut at home. I guess my question would be, and it's partially predicated, you made a comment showing the other multifamily units, 3 stories, and you said, hey, you can tell when they were built. And I feel like the same will be said of yours. And then down the road, there'll be the next one. Based upon some comment, at least a comment I made last time, and I think folks from the public, did you think about going with an architecture that would maybe meld in more with some of the existing, like the one that's right next to it, that's on El Paseo Circle, rather than, well, I'm going to fast forward the time warp clock again and put the next level of architecture in. Was there any thought given to that, to maybe make it blend in better?
To answer your question directly, no, we did not want to blend in. We did not want to be, because the El Paseo is in our backyard. If we replicated a craftsman-style architecture like they did in that situation, we'd feel like an extension or we would look like an extension of their project, and that's not what we wanted. We wanted our own identity. We have no problem with this timestamp. I mean, whatever we build there will pretty much tell people that it was, built in the 2020s, because our methods of construction and whatnot have gotten to the point where, it's the nature of housing, and even like I said, with that craftsman style architecture of the Walden Commons, it's timestamped primarily because we were in a Renaissance period of 1920s architecture. So, we feel strongly about what we're proposing is an attractive vocabulary, and would like to, see this project built in this vocabulary.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Any other questions from commissioners before we move to the public comment? All right, there being none, we will open for public comment on this project. Let's start in the chamber. If you wish to speak, please come on up, and also please fill out a speaker card if you have not. And then just as a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes for your comments, and we won't be able to really dialogue/answer questions.
Yes. Go. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting the public come back and revisit this plan.
Yeah, and if you state your name for us.
I'm Joe Pellissier, and I'm the 20-year resident that lives directly facing this vocabulary that you're so proud of. I will look at that every morning. There is no buffer. There are no trees except the trees that we're going to currently plant on our property. So I'm going off script. I was going to stay very focused to talk about preservation and scale, but there's been a few comments. I'm curious if staff has actually been to the location, and the amount of requirements that are put into this presentation makes it sound, and it's going to reinforce my comment on scale, that you're being forced to create these units in a lot that it can't accommodate. It's stressed by garbage. The garbage isn't going to go in the corridors, the 24 cans are going to sit on Walden Road like all the other residents' trash that sits on Walden. So to think a truck is going to go drive down that narrow roadway and back out, I think we might want to revisit that. But let me go back to preservation. The one conversation that we're not talking about is that grand center oak that's the jewel of this lot. That's now out of the plan. No plan came forward to stress what could we do to maybe keep that other than the original plan. We went right to the possible recommendation to rid ourselves of the messy oak, and they went right there and they put it there. It's a shame. I got to go back to the examples that they've shared tonight also are not reflective of the redwood trees that sit on the street level of those properties, providing a buffer to those 3-story units. And the other one that he says he doesn't want to fit in with is one of the other examples that just went up on Jones Road. And the difference with that property is it's buffered between 2 other townhouses, complexes that are 2-story and 3-story height. And the narrowest portion of that building is street facing. So it cascades deeper into that environment.
Great. Thank you.
I'm frustrated that a 20-year resident has 2 minutes in a, what do we call them, a study session? And I'm the one that's going to be so greatly impacted by this poor vocabulary. I'm tempted to call back in under another name to get to the rest of it.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
My name's Kent Yoshiwara. I live on Walden Road. My property backs up to the, I guess, the other project that was mentioned, the Walden Commons. What I appreciate about that project is the additional buffer space. There is a road that goes through there, and there were trees left so that I don't have somebody looking down on my backyard as much. I appreciate the comments regarding the less, I'm going to jump all over the place because I know my time's limited. The smaller driveway seems like that would be a much smarter approach to get the buildings off the perimeter. By pulling the buildings in closer to the road, I'm imagining that there would be more space for more trees to provide the additional buffer that I think I've heard already. There was a comment about I couldn't tell from the plans the height of the window sills. I happen to have a kitchen window that looks out on Walden Road, and as I'm washing dishes, I could see the people walking, and I kind of enjoy that contact. If I'm up on the second floor, I'm looking right down at the neighbor's house. The kitchen window is one place where I find that I look out the most. So that would be the window that I would think we wouldn't want looking over a neighbor. I could see windows with high sills, like clear story windows, where it allows light into the unit, but doesn't allow that unit to look down on the neighbors. So I would ask that that be considered. I think that was brought up earlier at the first meeting, but I don't know that that was really adhered to or followed. I would have thought that, and what really wasn't mentioned the first time, but if the oak tree were to be kept, that the buildings could have been brought much closer together to make a courtyard where the yards would face an open green area, see the trees, and then have a smaller perimeter road around to provide the vehicle access, which is completely separate from the pedestrian and playing space.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Yes, my name is Robert Mess, and I'm representing my brother who lives at 1388 Walden Road to the east side of this property. And it's great that they've moved the project
Can you
back.
get a little closer to the microphone,
Oh, sorry.
please? Sorry.
It's great that they moved the building back, but then they're asking for a request of not to step back the building. So in essence, they've moved the bottom of the building up, and then they've made it straight up. So you've got a 35-foot building that affects his light and ventilation. Okay, so that's one issue. The other issue is drainage. Okay, currently on the plan they have that the elevation is 99.69 on the property, and the Walden Road property from my brother drains directly across this particular property and into a storm drain on the far side. They're going to raise this, according to their own plans, at least a foot. And the original plan had a 1-foot retaining wall board that they'll raise a foot. So there's no way for this water on 1388 Walden Road to drain. And on the adjacent property to the east is 18 inches higher. So this is going to create a lake. They have to provide drainage pipes and an easement to be able to drain this property to that. And I don't know if that's in your purview or not. The other thing I'm thinking is that they're asking for a higher density. Why do they need a higher density? They can just reduce the square footage of the property in each, and they can step this thing back so it's not this giant square box that I think is ugly. And that's 5 feet from the road, and you're going to see a box, and there's nothing. Across the street are all single-story houses. So it's not in keeping with the neighborhood whatsoever. The third thing that I want to bring up is that on my brother's property, there are 2 40-foot Chinese elm trees, which they say are in poor health, which means when they build this project and they die, oh, they were going to die anyway. So there's no way with a 40-foot tree that's also 40 foot wide, it's going to be inside that. There's no way they can protect it. They might as well take it down, take those trees down, pay for them, and then put a row of trees down that line to be able to have a buffer between it. They only got 2 trees there. So I wish I could have longer to talk, but
Thank you,
there's
sir.
a number of issues.
Great, thank you, sir.
Can I use his 2 minutes?
Are the commissioners all right with that?
I'm fine with it.
Okay,
Well, it's just.
we'll give him another 2.
Another 2, okay. So they requested the density to be increased, if that's what floor area ratio is, okay? So why do you have to grant that? Can't you just say, no, you don't get the floor area ratio? Because all you're doing is just having 1,600 square feet is a fairly large house. So they're having 8 of them on a piece of property that's less than half an acre. That's an awful lot of space. Okay, they can reduce it by at least 15%, step back the building, step back the front, so they don't have this great square box. And they may think that that looks great, and it's of the times, but it's much nicer if things are brown tones and they blend in, because across the street is not zoned multiple. And so forever, those are going to be single-family homes, or if they do change at some point, then that has to be taken into account, even though the property that my brother has is a non-conforming home, which he's lived in for 25 years. So, anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Amir Kazemi. I'm one of the partners for this development. We are not developers. This is our first project, maybe our last one. And I plan to live in one of these units. I love Walnut Creek. It's not affordable to live in Walnut Creek, and we had no idea how much effort it would take to go through this process. I'm a structural engineer, and I've never touched this portion of this path of getting permits, and we have tried to comply with the neighbors. We originally wanted to build only 4 units because I have kids. I want to have a bigger units, house, but we can't. We cannot build. The zoning has changed 43 years ago. We can only build something like this, 7 units minimum. And we had to hire a lawyer to go through this maze, and we still had the first step. And again, we are not a big developer, and this is our first project. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers in the chamber? Do you want to? Yes. Yeah. I would say you missed opportunity as the developer, if you're part of the developer. Thank you. All right, anyone else in the chamber for public comment? Okay, how about on Zoom?
If anybody's interested in speaking, please raise your hand. I've got one here. Let's see. Why is it not? There we go. Curtis Radich. You should be able to speak now.
Are you there, Kurt?
Curtis, your microphone is off.
Yes, hello. Kurt Raditich here at 233 El Paseo Circle, Walden Commons. And I would just like to make a general comment about this project and support it. And I understand the developer. Thanks for speaking earlier. I've lived there since 2011. It's rented now, but we haven't been able to sell or get any comps on our properties for some time. And I would love to see this project go in. I think it will support Walden Commons. It will support the area. It will support values. We'll get some new comps in, and we might see more activity, not only in that area, but in Walden Commons, which will help property taxes and the city of Walnut Creek. So I did want to make that general statement, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, sir. Do we have anybody else on Zoom?
No other hands are raised. So no.
Okay, I'm going to break a tiny bit with protocol and just ask, do the other commissioners, do you want to hear the comment that the gentleman who's a part of the developer wanted to make or not?
I'm okay with letting them speak.
Okay, great. All right, sir, if you want to come up.
My name is Habib Saidni. I'm partner as part. Okay, yeah. I just want to make it clear that if you look at the Walden Road, all the properties north of Walden Road between Oak Road and Jones Road, they all zoned as M2.5. So sooner or later, they're all going to be developed, and so there won't be any single housing in future. So that was I was gonna add to the comment that gentleman made. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, then we will close public comment and now take commissioner comments. Vice Chair Killian?
Okay. I think you can thank your state government for this, not local government, but some of the cities are being pushed into this because of the state requirements. Anyway, having said that, I do agree with the last gentleman that just spoke up. We've had this over the years, you know, where you're the first one in, and you're kind of breaking the rules of what was there for the last 40 years. But again, you know, that's the way this is going. Now, having said that, I do think there are some issues with this. Now, it's my understanding, though, that there are certain things that we can't touch, again, because of state government, and they are allowed to build this. But I think with some tweaking and everything, we could maybe take some of the rough edges off of it. I agree completely about added screening along the front. I'm more in favor of lessening the width of the driveway at the expense of this, I guess, variance or whatever between the living units. But I think the added spacing outweighs the negative of having those living units closer together. So I would be in favor of lessening that 35-foot driveway. And again, Commissioner Newsom brought up other issues that may block that or not with the fire and trash collecting, so all that has to be worked out. I think, you know, there could be a little bit more working with the neighbors. You know, we're already putting a couple trees on the the rear yards. And again, if there's particular views that some of the neighbors are worried about, specific kitchen windows or whatever, I think we could add a few more trees in the rear yards to block that. I think that would be reasonable. I think I'm more concerned, again, is that this is, I always use the example of a rubber band that's wound too tight, and at some point it's just going to explode. And that's what I think is this project between the trash and the circulation, and, you know, there really is no common area. And to try to make it so, I would rather just see it being more of a passive landscaped area or more spacing between the buildings, and not try to force something in, you know, with some wording, you know, that says it's going to be a nice play area when in reality it's not. So I think those spaces could be looked at. So I do have concerns. I'm generally in favor of the project, and I would like to see it move forward. I think this architecture is kind of not cutting edge, but more modernistic, and that's just, you know, the flavor of the times, and I kind of like the edginess of it, if you will. While I agree that it doesn't fit in today by itself, I suspect in 5 or 10 years it's going to blend in very well, which again, I know the neighbors don't appreciate hearing that, but we've seen it all too often repeat this way. So to sum up my comments, I am in favor of this project. I think it needs some tweaking. I don't think it's quite ready yet in my mind for final approval.
All right, Commissioner Case.
I have a question, since I know we have the, sorry.
Can I clarify?
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
So Design Review Commission tonight is not granting final approval. As mentioned earlier, we're here for a recommendation so we can move forward to City Council for design review approval. So your comments, obviously, we can take, and the plans could be revised before it goes to City Council, if that's the direction. we're
Okay,
going.
so we only have to decide whether or not to advance it forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we can do that with our comments like we've done in the
Yes, you can definitely make comments, and they could incorporate that into their revisions before we take it to City Council.
Okay.
And that's because of the overlay, is that why?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Yes. And then is there, if we decided to do, hypothetically, like a subcommittee to review deeper or something we're suggesting, does that count as one of those public meetings, or?
It does.
What? Okay. So no on that. Okay. Is it my turn? Okay.
Yes.
The 20-foot by 20-foot square that's driving the overpaved area in the middle is something that I agree. I would rather waive that and have those buildings closer. I don't really feel like the skew is preventing the view from one to the other. I feel like, you know, you can just turn your body and look at your neighbor. So I would rather just square it off and squish it in so that we're having more space in the backyards to plant trees and buffers, and be more mindful of creating usable backyards, because these are higher density units and people like to have outdoor spaces because we live in California. And in line with what Commissioner Killian mentioned, is taking some of that space that's programmed to be that community area, which I think feels slightly unusable, and either just redistributing some of that area so that we're getting a little bit more of that buffer space, or maybe moving it entirely like to Walden Road so there's a little more, something different, because as it is now, it's feeling like it's kind of a 4 chairs at a table, and it doesn't seem like it has a ton of purpose, and it's tucked in the middle of the project, so it's not really available to anybody other than the people who live here, which isn't the end of the world. I think the location of the bike rack is taking up a lot of space in the middle, and I highly doubt a lot of people are going to use it. I think bike racks are good to have, although it seems like it's really meant for the people in these units, and they'll probably put it in their garage or in their backyard, so it seems like we're giving a lot of space in the central area to the bike rack that's not going to be used that often. I desperately want to see trees between the sidewalk that has to go in on Walden and the units, because I think it just needs something to break it up and soften it a little bit. I mentioned that the paving right up to the building is not my favorite experience of trying to explore if we can put some landscape, just softening things wherever we can, because it's feeling like the intensification, and I think you're hearing that response from the neighbors is a little too much. So if we can use the landscape to try to ground that a little more. I was even thinking maybe a trellis structure over the garages that has a vine on it, like something to make this feel a little more scaled, pedestrian scaled. I am bummed about the central oak. When we first got these plans, I was trying to see if I could place it back on there and how would you make that circulation work. And I'm gonna throw it in there that if we can just take one more stab and see if that's physically possible, because it is tough to take out things of that kind of stature. And then the east elevation stood out to me a little bit because it looks very mirrored of itself, and I realize that's the design of these, but this one where the two roofs pitch towards one another makes it feel really apparent, so I didn't know if there was just a simple way to distinguish those a little bit from one another without significantly impacting those units. And then trying to add trees along the backyard fences to help with screening seems reasonable and hopefully something we can include. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Newsom.
There was a lot there. I mean, I think, and there were some great comments from the neighbors. I think that these projects are tricky because particularly when you're dealing with state law and you have to allow these things. But you have to keep an eye on what's there now and the neighbors that are there now, but you also have to look at what inevitably is going to go next door someday. Someday, all of this will be built out as one of the developers there had to say. At the same time, if it's always going to be low scale at the front, you have to acknowledge that. And streetscape is very important regardless. I love this particular neighborhood. I ride my bike through there all the time. This changes the character of that neighborhood. And so I just want to echo the fact that you need more buffer in the front. You know, putting whatever rules there are aside, these buildings should be moved back. They need to be moved back to the north. There needs to be street trees. Like if you drive down this, you drive down Walnut. I've done it many times. There's a beautiful shady scale. If you put trees in front, it will bring the street scale down. I think the sidewalk is critical. My own kids have walked down these sequence of streets. There needs to be sidewalks planned. So I think that you need the sidewalk, but you also need the trees. It needs to relate more to the scale that's there. And inevitably, whoever it is who lives there in the future, if you think about this in the future being a wall of these buildings, you're going to need those streets. You're going to need that streetscape more. So that I would strongly advise. I think, other things, the color scheme, I think the colors selected here are good compared to some of the other kind of box of Crayola crayons that I see throughout Walnut Creek. I think they're sensitive colors. But I think you can address some of these concerns by and I appreciate the kind of transitional design here. It's modern, but there's traditional features. I think there's a good kit of parts here, but I think, in my mind, I would like to see darker colors on the bottom, lighter on the top, because I think if you do that, it's going to fade away a little bit more, particularly over time, when you're hovering over neighbors' properties to the level that you are. You need all those tricks to make it work. Again, I think if you can get trees around the perimeter to buffer things from the neighbors, particularly east and west, I think is important. I think to the north you have buildings like this, so move the buildings north. That's what I got.
Great, thank you. I've got a page with my notes here.
Got a book there.
do have a book, huh? Have to find the right page, bear with me. Okay. And this one's actually not on the page, what I'm about to say. So it's getting late, sorry. There's a lot of talk, I've heard a lot of comments about, well, it's all going to get built out anyway. It's not a foregone conclusion. We don't know that. We don't know if these properties, the single-family homes, which I find very interesting being called now sort of non-conforming units. It was originally zoned single-family. You know, those properties may get passed down. They may be sold to families that want to keep them as single-family properties. It may not change as fast as people anticipate, but also it could. Unfortunately, and somebody mentioned about 40 years ago, and thinking about Vice Chair Killian's comments about the state, I'm also one to also say, for a lot of the high-density housing you're getting, who you vote for in the state matters. So without getting political, we have legislature now that is basically solving the housing crisis. They deem the best way to do it is to override local control, override local zoning, override local density. So a lot of this is out of the hands of Planning Commission, Design Review Commission, City Council, et cetera. So I always like to say that because I want people to really think about who you vote for matters. In this case, this one's really interesting because approximately 40 years ago, it was the City Council that rezoned the single-family area into the medium-density multifamily, I believe. And their whole idea was they wanted people to combine lots and do high-density housing near BART. And you see that in the county plans with all the transit villages as well, with super high density. So in this case, the city, long ago, made a decision and implemented it. Then you get to the density. So it's mandated to be at least these 7 units. Depending on what the developer wants to do, if they wanted to make this project all low to very low income units or affordable units, the law allows for up to an 80% increase in the density. So it wouldn't be 7. It could be, it's not 14, maybe 12, 13. There are other developments in Walnut Creek on the table where there once were 2 homes that they're trying to put 13 to 16 homes. That's the state allowing that, encouraging that. So all in all, the developer here has really only asked for 1 extra unit. It's really at the low end of the state density bonus law. So that's a small favor to think about. Looking at this project got me thinking about our objective design review standards, because if I look at this architecture by itself, I like it. And I've seen this in other buildings. But then when I think about it, how does it integrate with the surrounding neighborhood? Then I'm not as much of a fan. So intrinsically, I like it, but I don't preferably like it. I don't prefer it where it's going to be situated because I think it's out of character. And I very much respect the comments of there is a timestamp imprint you can see in that area. But I think I was hoping for maybe a little bit more integration with the existing architecture to be a little more sensitive to the overall neighborhood. I do appreciate, I recognize there was a lot of changes made, moving the buildings closer together, giving bigger backyards, more ability to put up trees as buffers. And I think we've heard sort of a consistent, if you can make the buildings closer together and the driveway narrower and less pavement and more softscape would be preferable. But then Commissioner Case mentioned the grand oak in the middle, which that would be really cool to save, but I think that goes back to a whole nother redesign. So, I mean, all that being said, Normally, would I say I'd want to move a development like this with 8 homes in the middle of what used to be or looks like is single-family neighborhood, a traditional old single-family neighborhood? I'd say no, I wouldn't recommend it, but I have to respect the fact that long before I ever showed up here on the commission, it got rezoned to the multifamily. It's areas designated to be multifamily if people want to develop the property, and then we're stuck with the state laws on top of it. So I can't not, I mean, I can say I don't want it there, but it doesn't matter. It's an unrealistic statement I would be making. But I would like to see the suggestions from my fellow commissioners in terms of doing our best to have more trees, more buffering, more softscaping versus hardscaping, and with as much attention to the needs and desires of the surrounding neighbors as possible. Sorry, it was so long-winded. Back to the other page. So normally, after that, we would be looking for motions and voting, but we're not doing that on this project. Apparently, we are. I guess, Simmer, do you have plenty of notes to kind of form the feelings of the commission? Do you need something else from us?
I do, and I believe I'm going to take the comments that were across the board unanimous and take those comments and move them forward with a recommendation to move forward. Is that correct?
I would agree with, my opinion would be to move it forward.
Commissioner Newsom?
Agreed.
Commissioner Case?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I think we're concluding on this project.
I just want to, as a suggestion where it's going forward, I would be willing, it sounds like, at least from what I gathered, that little courtyard element, if that were to disappear and allow that unit to be pushed back off of Walden, I think that's a good trade-off, if that's possible. So.
All right. Our third project, we moved to consent and voted on it, so we are complete with that. So now we are moving to item 5, commission considerations. And I believe this is the section we've affectionately said is the secretary's section.
I have to ask one question. As I specifically talked about drainage, which is extremely important, and you're going to have a lake, and that none of you mentioned that. Are they going to be having to put some pipes in? What's going to happen?
The engineering, all the drainage has to be contained on-site and drained, and the engineer has taken care of it, so that
But
it will be.
they cannot, by law, impact the drainage from a neighbor to be able to flow to a drain that's on the other side of their property.
I would suggest that you contact Simmer and they can talk with
We have
engineer.
the civil engineer.
Civil
who
engineer to look
I
at.
could share contact information after the meeting with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There was your first consideration item, Secretary. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. I think you'll all be pleased to have Chip back for your next meeting. I can't even say it at this hour. Technology aside, it's been an interesting experience.
Well, thank you. Thank you for stepping in and putting up with us. All right, so no other announcements on your behalf? All right, then we'll move to commission member and staff reports or announcements. So do the commissioners have any announcements? And any staff reports? All right, and we will move to item 7, adjournment.